Part 51. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 501. Since the mine was closed in the 1980s, the Gate of Hell has become more and more mysterious. Due to its remote location, in the northernmost part of Russia, close to the Arctic Circle, the peninsula is sparsely visited. There is also a powerful northern fleet stationed there, making it difficult for ordinary people to get a glimpse of it. Has been cast a thick layer of mystery, and together with Bermuda, Tianqi and other places, it is also known as one of the world's most mysterious places. When Su Ming went to school in China, he heard many legends about the Gate of Hell, many of which contained materialistic analyses. Some people think that the mine may have been dug into a layer of magma and stopped working. Those devil roars coming from the underground are the sounds of magma flowing. Some people also think that this is the so-called devil legend, but it was actually deliberately forged by Soviet officials because the gold was mined. At that time, the Soviet Union and the West were in the Cold War period. The location of the peninsula was exactly at the intersection of the East and the West, and powerful troops were stationed there. Northern Fleet, so it released some terrifying news to achieve some political purpose. There are different opinions, but one thing is certain. In the decades since the mine was shut down, no large numbers of demons have appeared in the so-called Gate of Hell to destroy the world. The fleet and indigenous people on the peninsula still live a normal life. But the legend of the Gates of Hell persists. The Russian government allows the Lur people to live near the Gate of Hell, probably because that area is really wasteland and worthless. The Lur people won't go there, and no other Russians are willing to live there. It's better to just be a favor. Just in case, there really is something that cannot be predicted by science, and there really is a devil pouring out from the Gate of Hell, the Lur people can also act as a shield and provide an early warning. Of course, not only Su Ming, but also the Russian government believed that this possibility was basically negligible. Your Excellency, my belief in the Gate of Hell is pure nonsense, but the Lurs are a nation with religious traditions. They believe that there are devils and true gods in the world. If they are allowed to live near the Gate of Hell. Su Ming smiled, tapped the table with his fingers, and did not continue talking. A Russian government official said in a somewhat teasing tone, "But now the Lu people have found their true God. Oh, to be precise, it is the messenger of the true God. Under the leadership of the God's messenger, they will destroy all devils." You see, even the sacred scriptures of Zoroastrianism have proved that the area near the Gate of Hell is very suitable for the Lu people to live. Several other Russian officials couldn't help but shook their heads and smiled. Su Ming becoming the Lur people's godly messenger was a secret that could not be concealed. In the eyes of a civilized society, this matter was, to put it nicely, a beautiful thing. The misunderstanding, to put it mildly, is just a stupid joke. Except for the Lu people themselves, no one really took Su Ming's identity seriously. Even Ludmila, who had personally witnessed Su Ming pass various tests and broke through with him, didn't really think that Su Ming had any magical power. From Ludmila's point of view, Su Ming was simply very capable in all aspects and very lucky. Most of the people present were from the Russian side, and most of them had bad qualities. When it came to debates involving the interests of both parties, Russian government officials invariably sat down together. Su Ming's face remained normal and he said nothing. Amidst the laughter, he looked at President Vladimir calmly. This big boss is the one who can really make the final decision. Other old fools, just laugh. They are just a bunch of backdrops. Vladimir's face darkened slightly. Although it was not a formal diplomatic occasion, it was very impolite to laugh at the religious beliefs of another nation. Moreover, the young man sitting in front of him had just been awarded the Friend of the Russian People by him. Title: We will do a good job in infrastructure work on the Kola Peninsula, including necessary living measures such as housing, water, electricity, natural gas, etc., and provide necessary production and living materials for the Lur people. Vladimir's tone was calm, but he spoke very quickly about a series of help that the Russian government could provide. He even thought of details such as guns and language. Finally, he said, generally speaking, it is as good as the people on the peninsula. Other indigenous tribes will be treated equally and given full autonomy without violating the Russian constitution. However, in exchange, the Lur people's place of residence cannot be changed and they must become Russian citizens and must ensure that they do so within 50 years. The Lur tribe is not allowed to move from their settlement on the peninsula. I hope your country can speed up construction. After the bargaining was completed, Su Ming stood up, nodded and smiled at President Vladimir. Congratulations to Russia, there is a new nation. Congratulations also to you, the Chinese nation, and of course, Mr. Su, for having a summer palace for vacation on a peninsula with pleasant scenery, President Vladimir said. Successful people are very busy, Vladimir is like this, and Su Ming is no exception. After the general direction was agreed upon in the small conference room, the president stood up and left, returning to Moscow to handle government affairs. Su Ming stayed behind to finalize the specific details and sign an agreement with the official responsible for immigration. During this period, more than 2,000 Lo people finally left their homeland where they had lived for generations. From the war-torn Iraq, they took Russian transport planes in batches and flew directly to the Kola Peninsula, landing at the Northern Fleet's military airport. Arrive at their new home, Caribou Bay in the northern part of the peninsula. From the map, the Kola Peninsula in the northernmost part of Russia is only a small part of Russia's vast territory. With an area of 100,000 square kilometers, it is about the same size as a smaller inland province in China. The northernmost part of the peninsula, a small triangular area facing the sea, is the Reindeer Bay. As the name suggests, Reindeer Bay is rich in reindeer. This kind of Santa Claus's mount often appears in the pine forest of Reindeer Bay. Due to the lack of modern hunting and development, the number of reindeer is very large. Only the local residents of the peninsula and the Northern Fleet occasionally go hunting. The hunting speed can't keep up with the reproduction speed of the reindeer herd itself, so there is a trend of deer overcrowding. Reindeer Bay faces the Arctic Ocean, but it is not as cold as imagined. Probably because of the many trees, the temperature is above 10 degrees for half of the year, and even close to 20 degrees in summer, similar to the spring and autumn in China, with a pleasant climate. No wonder Vladimir said that this place will become Su Ming's summer palace. There are many river branches in the harbor, and lakes of all sizes are scattered everywhere. In the not-so-deep streams, traces of salmon and trout can often be seen. Su Ming arrived at Reindeer Bay almost at the same time as the last group of Lur people. On the largest plain in Reindeer Bay, the Russian construction team was working hard. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 502. The flag of the 2nd Engineering Corps of the Northern Fleet flew over the Reindeer Bay, and the machinery roared. The young men of the Engineering Corps rushed to Reindeer Bay as soon as they received the order to help the Lo people build their homes. This is also one of the achievements of Su Ming's negotiations with the Russian government. The Kola Peninsula is located far away. It will take at least 1 or 2 months for the construction units in the mainland to mobilize manpower and materials. Thousands of Lo people can't be savages in the wilderness. Moreover, the houses built by the Military Engineering Corps are not gorgeous, but they are absolutely strong and durable. Some special buildings are simply built according to the quality standards of military fortifications. Looking down from the small hillside, a plane has begun to dig frozen soil to lay the foundation. Not far from the construction site, many white tents have been temporarily built for the Lo people to live in temporarily. Teams of Lo people lined up to register their household registration and receive daily necessities from officials sent by the Russian government. Many skinny children ran and played in the tents in the camp. Su Ming walked into the camp. When the Lo people learned that their messenger of God had arrived, they immediately burst into cheers one after another, startling the Russian engineering corps that was working not far away. Ali and Basil, who was leaning on a cane, came out of the tent to greet him from a distance. They looked like they were about to bow down and worship him from a distance, but Su Ming stopped them with a very stern look. "Let's talk in the tent." Su Ming nodded and chatted as he walked. "What do you think of this place? Can you adapt to it?" The Lo people were used to living in Iraq. Suddenly they came to Russia, and there must be some things they were not used to in life. It's okay to not adapt for the time being. Su Ming was only worried that the Lo people would make trouble, which would be bad. In the eyes of the Russian government, the Lo people and themselves are one. If the Lo people do something weird, it will inevitably cause misunderstandings on the Russian side. Great God's messenger, this is absolutely impossible. As the scriptures say, you led the Lo people to defeat the devil, came to the picturesque paradise, and built a paradise for the Lo people. The hearts of the Lo people are full of gratitude, Ali said. Ali opened the tent, and a warm feeling came from inside immediately. The brazier seemed very inappropriate in the hot climate of Iraq, but it was just right at this time. Su Ming walked into the tent and first looked at the environment in the tent. On a temporary bookshelf made of wood, there were several rows of old books, and a large box was neatly stacked with new clothes. There was a rifle hanging in the corner of the tent, and a large bunch of red sausages. It looked pretty good. Su Ming sat by the fire, spread his hands close to the flames, and smiled. Don't just pick on the nice things. There are more than 2,000 Lo people here, and there are more than 2,000 thinking brains. There will always be all kinds of ideas. Your wisdom is enough to illuminate the sky. Ali sat down respectfully opposite him and smiled. It is inevitable to be uncomfortable at first, but compared with our settlements in Iraq, this is indeed a paradise. There is no need to worry about being forcibly summoned by the government, nor facing the guns of the Kurds and IS. The children can grow up healthily. And the Russian red sausage tastes very delicious. Of course, it would be better if there was only beef. We don't eat pork. Black bread is very good, it tastes fragrant and full. But I can't get used to beer, it's like horse urine, Basil interrupted loudly on the side, and Ali translated it with a smile. As long as you promise not to hurt others and yourself with fire, I can consider letting you be responsible for brewing according to the traditional way of the Lo people. Su Ming smiled. Basil scratched his head and chuckled. He was defending the authority of the god of fire that day. With Su Ming, a decent envoy of God, it was of course not his turn to defend the divine power. You see, there are still some things that are not adapted to or accustomed to, Su Ming said to Ali. These are not big problems. The tribesmen can understand. I have arranged some young people like Basil who have read books and have contact with the world to negotiate with Russian officials. You can rest assured. Oh, there is also the language problem. I want the children to learn 3 languages in the future. In addition to the Arabic of our ancestors, there are also Chinese and Russian. From this point, it can be seen that apart from the fanatical religious beliefs, Ali is actually a very wise old man. He regards the language education of children as the most important thing and reports it to Su Ming. Very good, just don't let the children work too hard. At this age, they should spend more time playing. It's better for adults to learn too. I don't want you, Ali, to be the only one who can understand me in the whole camp. Especially Basil, you have to learn Chinese and Russian, Su Ming said. After a period of contact, Su Ming found that in the Luo tribe, Ali was the chief and priest, and Amy was the head of the military force. The specific daily affairs of the tribe were handled by Basil. He could only understand Chinese, but could not speak it, let alone Russian. Lord God, you have considered the Luo people so well. Being able to eat and drink enough, without worrying about being shot and raped, is simply a great happiness. No Luo child would think that sitting in a heated room to study is a hard thing, Ali said sincerely. Oh, there is one more thing. Basil interrupted, Lord God's envoy, the engineers told us that we can move into a new house with electricity and heating in a month at most. So what should we do next? We want to build a real palace for you in Reindeer Bay. It will be completed by us lure people ourselves without relying on the power of the engineers. Palace, haha, it is not needed for the time being. What the lure people need to do now is to gain a foothold in Reindeer Bay. Su Ming thought for a while and said, what you need to do is to build a good relationship with other local tribes first, don't go to participate in government affairs. In addition, you can farm, hunt, and fish. On the way here, I saw that Reindeer Bay has a very good natural environment and rich resources. As long as they are not too lazy, the lure people can live comfortably here. You can discuss what to do specifically. If there is excess output, you can sell it to the Russians or to China. The sales volume will definitely be good. Don't worry, Lord God's envoy, the lure people are a hard-working nation. I promise that in at most half a year, you will see a Reindeer Bay full of vitality and vigor, Basil said confidently. After chatting about the future development direction of the lure people for a while, Basil took Zhao Yun and Nangong Huang to stroll around the camp. Only Su Ming and Ali I were left in the tent. Lord God's envoy, the boys have already gone to the gate of hell to investigate and found nothing abnormal. Are you going now? Ali I asked. Coming to Reindeer Bay, Su Ming certainly wanted to see what the legendary gate of hell looked like. He nodded and said, don't alarm too many people. Let Emil take the two smart guys and we'll go there on foot. Lord Messenger of God, let's drive. Ali I showed a strange expression. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 503. The Hell's Gate mine is located in a straight line of less than 5 kilometers from the plain where the lure people currently live. Standing outside the tent, you can see the outline of the mine a few kilometers away. It only takes more than an hour to walk there, and there are still many things to see on the way. Look at the surrounding scenery. Su Ming didn't understand what Ali I meant at first, thinking that he was old and didn't want to walk more. I couldn't help but sigh in my heart. Just a few days ago in the mountains of Iraq, is chased rabbits like rabbits in the rugged mountains for several hours. What followed was another day or two of fierce fighting. The high priest also I didn't say I was tired, which is good now. It has only been a few days since I settled down, and my spirit of hard work and tenacious struggle has begun to fade. It is true that one is born in sorrow and dies in happiness. Without the urgent pressure, even the wise old man Ali began to enjoy himself. But in the final analysis, it was just a ride in a car, and there was no corruption or luxury. Ali I was a very old man after all, and maybe he was not used to the relatively cold environment. Su Ming felt a little sad for a while, but didn't think much about it. After temporarily borrowing a military vehicle from the Corps of Engineers and declining the other officers' offer to send soldiers for protection, Su Ming, Ali, drove to the mine with Emil and two other love boys with guns. The road leading to the mine has been abandoned for many years. It is rugged and difficult to navigate, and there are many streams on the hillside. Fortunately, the Xiaolong military off-road vehicle imported by the Russian military from China under me has strong off-road capabilities and its leather is durable. 30 yards later, we arrived outside the mine. Seeing the entrance to the mine outside the mountain in the distance, Su Ming finally understood why Ali I insisted on driving instead of walking. Most people's concept of a mine is a hole in the mountain, with miners pushing carts or automated crawlers, and mine carts coming in and out of the mine. But when he saw the Gate of Hell mine in front of him, Su Ming realized that his ideas were too backward. The entrance to the mine in front of us does not need to be described as a hole at all. It is at least 40 to 50 meters wide and as high as 4 or 5 stories. Looking from a distance, the mine on the mountain looks like a giant beast crawling on the horizon, its mouth wide open. A cement road large enough for 5 or 6 cars to travel in parallel starts from a few dozen meters outside the mine and leads directly into the interior of the mine. Not far outside the mine, there are many scrap machines scattered around, including many heavy machinery such as cranes. Further away, there is a ruins. The original shape can no longer be seen. It can only be roughly judged from the scale. It should be where the miners and technicians were stationed decades ago when the mine was still in normal operation. Su Ming shook his head and smiled bitterly. He still hadn't seen much of the world. If you think about it for a moment, you would understand that the Hell's Gate mine was dug down for more than 10,000 meters. It was simply an underground palace, or even a small one. The underground city is just that. Such a large entrance is used to allow those machines to pass through and enter the mine to work. For such a large underground building, the entrance is only a part that can be seen. Hidden in the tens of thousands of meters of caves underground, it is absolutely complicated and has many branches. If you just walk on 2 legs. Ali must have known about the situation in the mine beforehand, so he proposed to drive here, not just for the sake of comfort. The young man who came to inquire about the situation walked downwards for more than 2 hours and almost got lost. Ali said with a wry smile. Thank you for reminding me to drive here, otherwise this time would have been in vain. Su Ming shrugged. After saying this, spiritual power surged out, covering several hundred meters around the mine. In a tundra forest, 2 grass finches and a family of 5 reindeer were discovered. Reindeer were of no use for the time being, so Su Ming was looking for the grass sparrow. This small bird is similar in size to a sparrow, but it has a distinct tuft of yellow hair on its chest and a small crown-like tuft of hair on its head. It is much more beautiful than the gray sparrow. Not only does it look great, its meat is also very delicate, making it the most delicious of the birds. In the cooking competition at the beginning of Stephen Chow's movie God of Cookery, the last chef with a face full of pustules made a specialty of Kinkan roast goose, which involved wrapping the goose in its belly and grilling it together. This little bird has amazing eyesight, and it also has a very useful skill, night eyes. 2 grass sparrows were hovering above the off-road vehicle, chirping as if they were asking for something to eat. Su Ming crushed a small piece of daliba and put the crumbs in his hand. The grass sparrows landed firmly in his palm. The little mouth pecked away. Set off. Seeing that the 2 little guys had almost eaten, Su Ming raised his hand and let the 2 grass sparrows fly into the sky. Then he lightly tapped the accelerator, and the off-road vehicle drove along the cement road into the entrance of the Gate of Hell. The space in the mine is still very spacious, with several cars side by side without feeling crowded. There are even street lights on the roadside every 100 meters or so, which of course have long been turned off. After driving along the sloping cement road for several hundred meters, the surrounding light gradually dimmed. Su Ming turned on the searchlight on the off-road vehicle, and a bright light illuminated dozens of meters ahead. 2 grass sparrows silently led the way and reared in the cave in the darkness. Su Ming could clearly see the surrounding environment through his soul-possessing ability. Along the winding mountain road, it seems that the ring road continues to go deep into the ground, leaving traces of manual excavation everywhere. There are often entrances to the mines like gates on both sides of the road. It is so dark that it is difficult to see what is going on inside. The cave was very quiet, and there was no devil's roar as the legend said. The roar of the off-road vehicle's engine became the only melody. In this environment, people will inevitably feel nervous and depressed. Amir and the 2 lure soldiers held their guns tightly and looked out of the window vigilantly, as if there would be demons in the dark caves around them, and they would pounce on the off-road vehicle at any time. Amir, you must have firm faith. With the Lord of God by your side, what demons can hurt you? Ali was not worried at all. Please forgive my cowardice, Father. Amir looked at the calm Su Ming and said to Ali with shame. While driving, Su Ming looked around with his soul-attaching ability. Although it was scary here, he did not find anything unusual along the way. He even let a sparrow fly into a branch mine cave to take a look. There were only some abandoned tools and rotten simple rooms in the mine cave. There was nothing else, not even a single corpse as imagined. The greatest fear of people comes from the unknown. The most frightening thing is a pale face suddenly appearing next to them. Therefore, in most horror movies, when the ghost really appears, the horror atmosphere will be greatly reduced, and only tension will remain. Su Ming has mastered almost every corner of the surrounding hundreds of meters through his soul attachment ability. There is no unknown at all, so there is no fear at all. It's nothing more than concentrating on paying attention to the surrounding environment. The off-road vehicle maintained a low speed and drove for a full hour. The terrain in front finally flattened again. Arrived at the bottom of the 10,000-meter mine. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 504. A Boeing aircraft flew through the clouds, crossing the sky over outer Mongolia, flying from Russia to China. Brother-in-law, is there really nothing inside the gate of hell? Nangong Huan kept asking Su Ming this question on the way back home, and even Zhao Yun was a little curious. Su Ming shook his head, recalling everything that happened at the bottom of the Hell Gate mine yesterday. There was really nothing in the legendary gate to hell. In other words, Su Ming and his party did not discover any supernatural phenomena at all. At the bottom of the Hell's Gate mine, the space is very large, almost like a small square. There are many abandoned houses in the square, and there are even laboratories and small power generation equipment. You can imagine that when the mine was still in operation decades ago, it must have been brightly lit and many Soviet scientists and mine workers were busy. But there are none of the bizarre events in the legend, such as flying devils, painful calls, or magma underground. Su Ming drove his car around the underground square, carefully searching every room. He even used his mental power to control a group of rats he could find, and searched every corner. He never found anything unusual. No possible hidden caves or passages were found. On the surface, this place is just a large abandoned mine. But Su Ming always felt that something was wrong. After decades, the buildings found outside the mine and along the way down have basically collapsed and decayed, but the buildings in this small underground square have only fallen a thick layer of dust. In large mines, miners often have to work for several days once they go down. Therefore, there are various living facilities in the mines, such as washrooms, bedrooms, for the miners to rest and entertain, and even special microbars. But no matter what the setting is, they are basically temporary buildings. Once the mineral deposits in this area are excavated, they will be demolished and moved to the next mining area. Permanent materials are rarely used, and some are simply made of iron sheets. But the underground square at the bottom of the Gate of Hell, from laboratories to ordinary houses, is all made of thick reinforced concrete, and is generally very thick, as if it is a permanent military base. In addition, there are rows of shelves in several rooms, with large boxes with numbers printed on them scattered inside. They are obviously places where weapons are stored. If this is just a mine, why do permanent fortifications need to be built? Why do we need so many weapons? The biggest threat to the mine is collapse. The depth of 10,000 meters is equivalent to dozens of New York Empire State Buildings standing overhead. Once it collapses, no matter how strong the fortifications are, no matter how powerful the firepower is, it will have no effect. But if there was something fishy here, Su Ming tried his best and didn't find anything unusual. After checking for several hours, Su Ming was a little disappointed and returned without success. On the way back, Su Ming was deeply impressed by Ali's words. Master God Envoy, I think maybe until now, you don't believe in the existence of the true God. Haha, you don't have to rush to deny it. As a person from the so-called civilized world, this is normal. Fate has sent you to the Lure people. Around you, fate has allowed you to lead the Lure people to build a new home. As I have discussed with you before, fate may be the hand of God, but as mortals, we cannot see destiny clearly. That's why God guides us in a subtle way through the Holy Scriptures. The Holy Scriptures say that the people of love follow God's messengers and kill all demons. Now we come to the legendary gate of hell and stationed near the gate of hell, which seems to coincide with the Holy Scriptures. So I think we don't have to bother to find where the devil is or what he is. We just need to follow your footsteps faithfully and face everything bravely. Ali's words can be summed up in 2 points. First, no matter whether you believe in God or not, we believe in you anyway. Second, as long as any monsters dare to show up, they are the stuff of dragons and tricks. Anyway, it is clearly written in the Holy Scriptures that the divine messengers will kill all devils. In the plain, Zhao Yun listened thoughtfully to Su Ming's words and said, according to some signs, prehistoric civilization does exist. Many of the religious classics spread around the world are related to prehistoric civilization. It's just that ours technology has not yet developed to that point, and many prehistoric civilizations cannot be explained and can only be attributed to the theory of gods and ghosts. Prehistoric civilization? I know, it means that human beings will go through reincarnation every once in a while, and then a super catastrophe will destroy a little bit, and the creatures on the earth will start to evolve again from cells. In fact, there was a high-level civilization hundreds of millions of years ago. Such as the continent of Atlantis, Nangong Huang interrupted. The gate of hell, is it related to prehistoric civilization? This thought flashed through Su Ming's mind. After pondering for a while, whether it was a prehistoric civilization or the hand of God, this problem was too mysterious. I couldn't solve it now, and I couldn't even figure out the solution. In this case, let's not consider it at all. The Hell's Gate mine has been in Russia for decades. If something happened, it would have happened a long time ago. How can we wait until now? Besides, if the sky falls and someone big is watching, the Northern Fleet is not a freeloader. As for the devil mentioned in the Holy Book, it is probably just a vague reference. For example, the devil we encountered last time was actually is. No matter what, take a nap and go back home. The plane returned to the sky of China. The Iraq trip finally ended, and the subsequent impact was still fermenting. Su Ming did not catch up with the party's birthday, but the 200 new Lure people, as the 57th ethnic group in China, showed up at the celebration ceremony in the capital. The whole country was boiling, as if the country had embarked on the road to great rejuvenation. Su Ming himself has 2 more titles. The first is a representative of the National People's Congress, which also includes a representative of the Yangchuan Municipal People's Congress and a representative of the Provincial People's Congress. It is not too difficult to become a representative of the National People's Congress. For example, world-renowned scholars, university presidents, CEOs of listed companies, and Olympic champions all have certain opportunities. If Su Ming's current career develops steadily, there will be hope in about 10 years. Another title, the most grassroots cadre in the country. Leader, what a joke, neighborhood committee director, Su Ming almost spit it out. Wang Jianxi told him that the Lure people temporarily live in the back mountain of the zoo, but the management must comply with the household registration system of China. Together with the employees who often live in the zoo, a Daowen community will be established, and Su Ming will serve as the director of the community neighborhood committee. Su Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How could he say that? A few days ago, he was still thinking about the great proposition of human civilization, and in the blink of an eye, he became a neighborhood committee ante. Should I collect water fees? Should I manage family planning? Should I mediate the conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law? Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 505. A few days ago, Su Ming was still fighting against terrorists for the safety of all mankind, leading the Lure people to suppress the gate of hell, and considering the big proposition of where mankind came from and where to go in the future. When he returned to China, he immediately transformed himself into a neighborhood committee ant. Ant is ant, managing the lure people is still very advantageous. No matter how rebellious these guys are, they have to give 7 points of face to me, the envoy of God. It seems that no one can manage them except me. The 200 lure people who came back with me are basically young people in the tribe. Among them, there are 2 rows of people who have served in the Iraqi government army. They are regular soldiers who have fought and killed people. These 60 people, led by Amir, shoulder the glorious mission given to them by the entire Lure tribe, to protect the safety of the envoy of God, but Su Ming thinks that the witty old man Ali I may have some other ideas, such as letting Amir follow him, so that he, the envoy of God who does not believe in God at all, will not feel bored one day and suddenly give up and abandon the Lure people. Su Ming scratched his head. Other people's positions were getting higher and higher, but his position was getting lower and lower. Before the zoo was restructured, the director was at least a deputy division level official, but now he has become a neighborhood committee director without a rank. Is the next goal to strive for to become a deputy section level street office cadre? Leader, although I am not a regular neighborhood committee director, it is still a public office anyway. I am now in charge of the zoo and have my own private company. If I become the neighborhood committee director, it seems to violate the regulations that party members and cadres are not allowed to do business. Su Ming's mind is still very clear. He took a shot in advance. He had come across big rivers, so he didn't want to capsize in the gutter. Don't worry, the organization has considered it, and special matters will be handled specially. Wang Jianxi was in a good mood. Wang Hao made a big splash at the live broadcast platform conference in the capital. The 57th ethnic group in the country settled in Yangchuan City, which was a happy event for both the public and private sectors. Especially the latter, the country has one more ethnic group, which is a grand occasion that has not happened in the past 100 years. From a historical perspective, it exceeds any so-called political achievements. It can even be predicted that in the future, he is likely to leave his name in the history of Yangchuan City along with the 57th ethnic group. There are a lot of deputy mayors and mayors in the history of Yangchuan City, but those who can really leave their names in history, I dare not say that there will be no successors, at least there have been no predecessors. Go ahead and do it boldly, young man. The municipal government is your strongest backing, Wang Jianxi encouraged. Su Ming also laughed. So, despite the various drawbacks and unsatisfactory aspects of the motherland, Su Ming still loves this country very much. Abroad, he was worried and the whole person was in a tense state all the time, like a wild Ultraman carrying the responsibility of saving the earth on his shoulders. When he returned to China, he immediately relaxed and didn't have to think about those big problems at all. He just had to take care of his own little piece of land. What about human beings and peace? Let the superior organization worry about it. This newly established community is called the Lure community to the outside world, but people who are familiar with it are used to calling it the Daowen community. First, all the companies under Su Ming's name are named Daowen. Second, for the Lure people, leaving the war-torn Iraq and coming to the peaceful and quiet Yangchuan City is indeed like entering a paradise. A few days ago, the news that Russia accepted 2,000 Lure people has spread all over the world. Engineers helped the Lure people build their homes. Photos of the great unity of the Russian nation appeared in major media around the world. President Vladimir attended any occasion with a faint sense of superiority on his face. The Chinese government certainly cannot be compared with the Russian government. It has given great policy preference to the newly established Daowen community. In the first 10 years, Lure people can directly exempt from tax no matter what industry they are engaged in. After that, it will increase every year for a period of 10 years. After more than 10 years of employment, it will be levied according to the National Unified Standard, and enterprises mainly composed of lure people can get a series of government support from orders to tax refunds. The latter policy, anyone with a discerning eye can see, is largely an economic reward for Su Ming himself. In addition, detailed policy preferences were formulated in a short period of time in terms of schooling, employment, social security, etc., even down to the small details of interest discounts on bank loans for house purchases. The policy preference is to help the lure people develop better in China in the future. The current priority is the problem of survival and residence. With the pearls and jades of Russia, the Chinese government is unwilling to lag behind. The arrival of a new nation must always give them a living area. The land in the city is very expensive. An acre of commercial residential land can be bought for millions. Of course, it is impossible to allocate it to the lure people. The mountain behind the zoo is different. There are continuous green mountains and white clouds. Except for the small hills that were clearly under the name of the zoo before, the remaining continuous mountains are all great gifts for favors. Anyway, these are all barren mountains. It is impossible for real estate developers to develop them within decades. Giving them to the lure people as a home is a benefit without cost. Foreign countries came to pay tribute, and hundreds of people changed their nationality to join China. The Russians directly allocated a harbor with rich resources and beautiful environment. Of course, China could not show weakness and also allocated a mountainous area with beautiful environment and rich resources to the Lo people. The governments of major countries are all cunning. The biggest common feature of the two regions is that they are actually of no value to the government and are empty anyway. The superiors had clearly instructed that things should be done beautifully. The provincial government and the Yangchuan municipal government held a meeting to discuss and directly drew a small circle at the corner of the Qinling Mountains on the map. A small circle on the map is actually a huge area, which is all included in the Daowen community. The area under the jurisdiction of Su Ming, the director of the Daowen Community Residence Committee, is larger than that of an ordinary county magistrate. The Russian government sent engineering troops to help the lure people build their homes. The Chinese government, based on the principle of respecting national customs, did not participate in the construction work and directly gave the Daowen Community Residence Committee a sum of money to let the lure people build their own houses and buy daily necessities. The work of the Community Residence Committee is characterized by complexity. From building houses to buying a wash basin and a toothbrush for each of the 200 lure people, the Community Residence Committee needs to take the lead in handling it. Su Ming, the director of the Community Residence Committee, who is alone, is really too busy to handle it. Fortunately, there are many elderly people with life experience in the zoo, and they have temporarily taken part-time jobs in the Community Residence Committee. The veterinarian and the nurse were responsible for the health of the lure people, Sister Tong and the zoo's accountant were responsible for purchasing daily necessities, and Liang Shi selected 20 strong young men to live directly by the reservoir and join the fishery company. Su Ming focused his main energy on building houses. Land plus money plus policy equals real estate development. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 506. If time goes forward a few years, the real estate industry is an absolutely huge profit industry. High profits are only one aspect. The most important thing is that if you have a building and land on hand, you can easily obtain a huge loan from a bank and use the loan to develop it. Next property, and then use the second property to get a loan. In this way, a huge real estate empire can be built in a short time. Of course, the risks are also huge. If any link in the capital chain is broken, it will cause a chain reaction and a complete collapse. The boss will either run away or jump off the building. However, since 2002, the real estate market has entered a completely irrational and hot period. Although the country has issued policies every day to achieve steady growth, Housing prices have been soaring, and the entire market has entered a kind of abnormal prosperity. As long as there is, you don't have to worry about sales. In the past 2 years, the state has intensified its regulation and control, but housing prices are still so expensive. However, most of the money earned through land and various taxes has fallen into the pockets of the state. The days of real estate companies are not as good as before. Even so, the profits of real estate, the rate is also much higher than that of the traditional manufacturing industry, and it is still one of the most profitable industries. The biggest thresholds for entering the real estate industry are land and funds. Su Ming currently has these two conditions on hand. Of course, Su Ming's current situation is not the same as commercial development. The land in Daowen community is allocated to the Luo people. It is impossible for Su Ming to build residential communities and commercial buildings here. Even if the government allows it, he himself will not do so. That would completely destroy the environment of the back mountain and would be inconsistent with his future overall plan. The Luo people also don't like to live in high-rise buildings in the city. They prefer a tribal lifestyle. But this is an excellent opportunity. The construction of a living area for 200 people is a small project compared to a community with dozens of buildings. Although it is small, it has all the essentials. From the drawing, planning, construction, and approval and acceptance of all aspects, it is a small project. With everything available, it is entirely possible to train the prototype of a future real estate team through this Luo community construction. Su Ming simply registered a real estate development company, Daowen Real Estate. The prototype of the real estate company was mainly based on the engineering team of Uncle Su Desheng. Su Desheng started as a bricklayer and plumber at the lowest level. He knows the construction industry very well and is an absolute expert. In the past 6 months, he has been entrusted with many large and small construction projects at the zoo. In terms of relationships and business, he is his own person. With the help of accountants and lawyers, there is no need for sales business for the time being, and the prototype of a real estate company is ready. Uncle, the purpose of this business is not to make money. You treat La as one of your fellow villagers. The style of the house must be discussed with the Luo people. The quality must be excellent and you are not afraid of spending money. If the government allocation is not enough, I will subsidize it. The key is to understand all aspects of real estate through this single business and cross the threshold of real estate. Su Ming specifically explained that Daowen Real Estate is now positioned as an apprentice in the entire industry, using land and funds specially approved by the government to practice. With this construction experience, Daowen Real Estate Company has the ability to independently carry out real estate development. Even if Su Ming has no projects on hand in a short period of time, he can still take on business from outside, make money and practice again. One day, Su Ming will be here. When conditions are ripe and there is a project, Daowen Real Estate can be put to use immediately. In most industries, the first hurdle is to get started, and even getting started is the most difficult level, so opportunities are very important. If you seize the opportunity to get started, you may be able to soar into the sky. Under normal circumstances, with Su Ming's current strength, if he wanted to enter real estate, he would not have enough funds, and he would have to compete with big players in various fields, so there was basically no possibility of success. This Daowen community construction gave him an opportunity. Put half of your foot in the door first, and if you have the opportunity in the future, you can always follow with the other foot. The Uncle Su Desheng looked serious. He didn't say a word from the beginning to the end. He had a straight face, just like a member of the death squad who was about to go to the battlefield. Su Ming was confused. Uncle, what are you thinking about? Is there something I haven't considered? Su Ming handed over a cigarette. Oh, no, Su Desheng quickly took the cigarette, took out a lighter, lit it for Su Ming, and then took a puff himself, exhaling a puff of smoke with a sigh in his voice. When I heard you talk about the real estate company, It felt like a dream. Last year at this time, I was still working as a temporary worker in the town. The few brothers who worked with me sometimes didn't receive a call for several days. I worked alone, living in a small shanty, and couldn't bear to eat pighead meat for a week. Later, I followed you to the city, and there was endless work to do every day. The former little brothers became foremen one by one, and they were everywhere. This is the boss and that is the boss. Some are in charge of 5 or 6 people, and some are in charge of 10 or 20 people. We got together to drink together 2 days ago, and I felt that I had never dared to think about it before. If it could always be like this, if you go on, your life will be in vain. It's as if these words are still in your ears. As a result, when you come back from abroad, we have transformed into a real estate company. It turned out that the changes were too fast, and his uncle Sudasheng could not catch up with this idea. Su Ming laughed and said, "Is everything okay at home?" "Well, most of them are from Suntown and Moxie County. They are considered fellow villagers. Now every family has a 2-story building," the uncle said. Su Ming probably knew the situation. Several members of the early construction team had made some money now. His family would visit his mother whenever they had something to do. During the chat, they would sometimes complain. After all, when people have some money and are alone in a foreign place, they will inevitably do some bad things, especially those who work in the project. There are very few who are not involved in eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling. Especially gambling. The gambling atmosphere in the countryside is very strong. Some young workers work hard all year round to make some money, but they can lose it all in a few days during the new year. And whoring. This Uncle Sudasheng is better. On the one hand, he is relatively stable because he is older. On the other hand, he is the big boss and will consider the role of example when doing things. Moreover, he is directly responsible to himself in the construction team. If he does something wrong in private, Su Ming will be the first to speak up. The conversation has come to this point, and Su Ming has to say a few words. He has hope for the future real estate company and the current construction company. Now there is a rise of evil trends in the construction team, and it is necessary to suppress the bad momentum in time to prevent the bad atmosphere from spreading or even deepening. Eating, drinking, and even prostitution, Su Ming doesn't want to interfere too much, but gambling is definitely not allowed. No matter how big the family business is, a gambling game can ruin it. And gambling and drugs are often stuck together, both of which are things that kill people without compensation. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 507. After thinking for a while, he said, "Uncle, I know a little about the situation of the engineering team. I won't talk about the details. Our company will have to grow bigger and stronger in the future. Now is just the beginning. If a lot of bad habits are fostered in the startup stage, what will happen in the future? It's okay to hurt yourself, but if it involves the company, it will harm everyone. So you have to have a spectrum in your mind. Some people can be used, some can't be used, some can be used in a small way, and some are worth cultivating and can be used in a big way. There must be a difference. People who like to say that they don't care about small details when they achieve big things, most of them can't achieve big things. They use this sentence to shield their small problems. Don't do a lot of messy small things before big things are done, which will drag the company down and cause big trouble. A loud drum doesn't need a heavy hammer to hit it." Su Ming said this, and the uncle understood. Su Ming had never treated them badly in terms of money. After all, without Su Ming, there would be no current construction team. They were all old brothers and old companions back then. They could no longer tolerate each other blindly because of their consideration for someone's face and old friendship. The rules that should be set should be set. Those who are motivated can be promoted and reused. If there are really unmotivated people, Sudasheng will not protect them. Next, Sudasheng finalized the housing construction work of Daowen community. In addition to residential buildings, a small cram school was specially built at the foot of the mountain not far from the community. The biggest problem of the Luo people at present is the language barrier. Among the 200 Luo people who came, only one person could speak a few simple Chinese sentences. Usually, communication with Suming was basically based on gestures and guessing. The community committee specially hired an Arabic translator, but they couldn't always rely on the translator. If you want to live in Yangchuan City, the first thing you have to pass is the language barrier. This training school is specially used to teach the Luo people Chinese. Speaking of training schools, we have to mention Ren Chen. Ren Chen appeared in Suming's site again. His company is composed of a private school and several well-known cram schools. Suming invited a group of the best Chinese teachers from Ren Chen's language cram school. It is a trivial matter to borrow a few teachers. It does not require Ren Chen's approval at all. Any middle-level cadre in his company can make the decision. But after Ren Chen knew about this, he personally picked a few gold medal teachers in the school and visited Suming on the same day. Money? Mr. Su, it's vulgar to talk about money. It's just a few teachers. You can use them as you like. Speaking of which, I still benefited from your help. Ren Chen took the initiative to hand over a cigarette and said with a smile. If he, the boss of a listed company, had some economic superiority in front of Suming before, now Suming's political status has completely overwhelmed him. Due to my help, Suming smiled. That's right. Providing language services to the 57th ethnic group in the country is a publicity that can't be bought with money. If it weren't for you, a great hero, this good thing would be fought over by language schools and cram schools across the country. Ren Chen said with a smile, Mr. Su, I actually have another idea. Tell me about it. Suming was slightly stunned and said, tell me. Ren Chen is a man who spends a lot of money, but he is definitely a good businessman. He has a lot of business experience and a keen sense of business opportunities. Suming wants to hear what tricks he has come up with. Cooperative school, Ren Chen said. Cooperative school? You mean? Suming slapped his forehead, thought for a few seconds, and immediately realized it. This guy's brain is very fast. Although the Luo people don't know Chinese, they know Arabic. Isn't this a ready-made foreign teacher? There are not many people learning Arabic in China. It is precisely because of this that there are even fewer teachers of Arabic, and full-time Arabic teachers are almost rare. In the several liberal arts universities in Yangchuan City, there are a lot of students studying English, French, German, Russian and Japanese, but there are very few students who can do simultaneous translation. The Arabic translator currently working in his neighborhood committee was specially transferred by Wang Jianxi from the Foreign Affairs Office of the municipal government. Suming has inquired that if he leaves the government and works as a professional translator, he can easily earn more than 100,000 yuan a year. English is also a semi-official language in Iraq. Many young Luo people not only know Arabic, but the two platoons of soldiers who retired from the army can basically have simple English conversations. Several squad leaders and platoon leaders speak English as fluently as their mother tongue. Even if they are not good at teaching, they can definitely be oral practice companions. Not only English, some people can also speak French. Thinking about it this way, Luo people are actually quite versatile, and they are completely in line with international standards in terms of language. They are much better than me, a college student who has studied English for more than 10 years and needs translation to watch American TV series after passing the Level 4 test. Damn the education system, wasting so much of my time. If I had spent all the time I spent learning English on playing games, I could have trained dozens of full-level trumpets. If I had spent all the time on watching movies, my unicorn arm would have been trained to the 10th major stage of success. If I had spent it on dating, maybe my children would have been able to help with cooking. Ren Chen's idea is to hire low people to be Arabic teachers and teaching assistants for various subjects. This is really a good idea. Anyway, low people have nothing to do in the short term. Being a teacher can not only make some extra money, but also increase exposure, get along with the Chinese people, and integrate into the Chinese society as soon as possible. In addition, it is also a huge boost for them to learn Chinese. As for Ren Chen's company, it will increase its visibility and recruit more students, but that is not what Su Ming considers. Since it is a cooperation, the other party must also have interests, and win-win is the kingly way. Don't worry, Mr. Su, I will pay them according to the market price for teaching and speaking practice, and there will be shuttle buses to pick them up and drop them off. I will never treat them unfairly, Ren Chen said. No problem, you go and draft a contract, and I will sign the contract with you on behalf of the community committee. Good things should be done to the end. I can also let the lure people cooperate with your education group to need lure people for publicity and reporting, Su Ming said. That's simply the best. Ren Chen was stunned at first, and then laughed. Let's go, I'll take you out and go see the lure people. By the way, Su Ming stood up and said. It's not only Su Ming who went to see the lure people. The 200 lure people have become the most concerned creatures in the zoo these days. The house in the back mountain is temporarily under construction, and most of the lure people are temporarily living in the empty houses in the zoo. Every day, outside the residence of the lure people, there are a large group of tourists who come to see this new Chinese compatriot nation. The lure people are a little alert. A row of young men stand guard at the gate from morning to night. We need to speed up the construction of houses. It's not good to do it like this all day. The lure people are not animals. What's the big deal about being watched all the time? Su Ming slapped his forehead and said a little speechlessly. Speaking of animals, animals don't have houses to live in either. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 508. Su Ming returned safely, and everyone was relieved. He was severely criticized by Nangong Yan, and he wrote a 500-word self-examination to get away with it. Sister Tong finally stopped blaming herself and put all her energy into work. The biggest job of the zoo at present is to arrange the new animals, and even the martial arts competition has to be arranged in the back row. Fortunately, the martial arts competition has been regularized, so there is no need to worry too much, and it can be rescued step by step. Sister Tong compiled a form and reported the current situation of the animals in the zoo to Su Ming. Including the animals brought back from Iraq, the total number of animals in Yangchuan Zoo has reached 3,500 head/animals, and the number of species has doubled compared to before. Among them, there are more than 30 kinds of animals, all of which are rare species in China. The situation is very good. If we apply for a scenic spot now, there will be no problem, and we can even consider 5A. But the problem is that so many animals have exceeded the capacity of the zoo, and new enclosures must be built. Some animals can be classified and squeezed with animals of the same species. For example, platypuses live with wild ducks, peacocks live with pheasants, antelopes live with goats. But this is not a long-term solution, and many animals have no place to live. For example, the 2 rhinos, who should they squeeze with? What about the big hippopotamus? They can't live with crocodiles. So the expansion of the zoo has become a top priority. Money, money, money. Everything costs money, and Su Ming once again found that there is not enough money. The zoo's accounts are separate from those of other companies. Su Ming is a professional manager of the zoo and cannot use the profits of other companies to subsidize the zoo. The zoo does not aim to make profits. It is very stressful to spend too much money on venue construction at once. I didn't notice it before, but now that enterprises and zoos are getting bigger and bigger, some problems left over from the original restructuring have been exposed. Responsibilities and rights and property rights are unclear. The zoo is similar to a collectively owned enterprise. As the director, I am just a manager with management rights but no ownership rights. The zoo's profit and loss are not closely related to my income. I have a fixed salary. If it makes a profit, I will get a considerable bonus. The winery, entertainment company, fishery, etc. are all my own private enterprises, which are mainly controlled by me. The management rights and ownership are in my hands. Many businesses of these companies are dependent on the zoo. When the enterprise is small, it is not felt. As it grows, many aspects are constrained, the accounts are messy, the finances are not smooth, and it is impossible to cooperate efficiently. If it is established as a 4 or even 5 a scenic spot in the future, the zoo, the various scenic spots and projects in the back mountain, and several companies will inevitably participate in it. At that time, how to calculate management, income, and investment will be very troublesome. Su Ming does not want to work hard for a long time and make wedding clothes for others. If the zoo can be completely bought and run privately, this problem can be completely solved. Even if it follows the model of Zhao Yun's private museum. Whether the government can agree not to consider it for the time being is not impossible in principle, but it is nothing more than negotiations on specific details. But first, I must be able to come up with a large sum of money. This is not something that can be solved with a few million, but hundreds of millions. The three main profitable sectors, the winery, the fishery company, and the entertainment company, do not make enough net profits in a year. The subsequent real estate company, restaurant business, etc., still need time to grow gradually. In fact, after buying the animals this time, Lao He from the Tourism Bureau once suggested that the zoo should apply for 4A immediately. If it were before, Su Ming would definitely agree without hesitation. But now, he thinks more deeply. Once the zoo is rated 4A or even 5A, and it is open to the public as a comprehensive scenic spot, then we can talk to the government about the acquisition. The price will be different from now. Acquiring a scenic spot and acquiring a zoo are completely different concepts. What could be done with 100 million or 200 million yuan may cost 700 million or 800 million yuan or even more at that time, and the government may not be willing to sell it. We must find a way to make money as soon as possible. Director? Director, seeing that Su Ming was distracted, Sister Tong reminded him in a low voice, what should we do about the construction of the venue? Oh, Su Ming came back to his senses, frowned, pondered for a moment, and said, well, in principle, try not to have a big investment. If you can squeeze in, squeeze in. In addition, you can count how many of our animals are key protected animals that must be kept in cages, which are more dangerous animals, such as tigers and lions that can cause harm to humans, and which ones can be released. After hearing Su Ming say this, after hearing what Su Ming said, Sister Tong immediately understood 70% of it and asked in disbelief, Director, do you mean to officially launch the wild release plan and release some animals into the back mountain? Almost Su Ming smiled, we say it is a wild release to the outside world, but in fact, we just use the back mountain as a relatively simple wildlife park. Su Ming's idea is to minimize the current investment in infrastructure and equipment of the zoo. A large number of animals are nominally released into the wild, so that if they are acquired in the future, this part cannot be included in the zoo's assets, and the zoo can save a lot of money in its accounts. To make money, you must first invest. The zoo's wild release work has been mentioned for many years and has been done intermittently, but when Su Ming said this, Sister Tong was still shocked. Director, this is not just a few dozen animals. According to what you said, we may have to release hundreds of animals in a short period of time. Yeah, that's right, Su Ming nodded. How can this be done? Sister Tong saw that Su Ming was serious, and hurriedly said, after all, they are used to living in the zoo. If they are released into the wild all at once, many animals will not be able to adapt. Director, the work of releasing animals into the wild must be done step by step. Looking at the whole country, releasing animals into the wild is a big problem. Even professional animal research institutions have to spend months or even years to slowly train a group of animals to return to the wild. If we release a large number of them at once, will this be? She considered the wording and said, will it be too risky? Since the establishment of Yangchuan Zoo, in the past few decades, all the animals that have been successfully released into the wild have added up to less than 30. And Suming released hundreds of animals into the wild without any warning. Releasing animals into the wild is definitely not to say that releasing animals back into the wild is the end of the matter. The premise is that the animals must be guaranteed to survive in the wild. If the safety of the animals cannot be guaranteed, it is extremely irresponsible to release them into the wild rashly. If a large number of released animals get sick or die, who will bear the responsibility? No one can bear it. This is also the reason why zoos across the country are reluctant to release animals into the wild, as the risk is too high. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 509. Release work involves all aspects of technical issues and there are too many conditions. Every release, even with sufficient preparation, is a huge challenge for zoos and research institutions, and for the animals being released, it is even more of a challenge. The adventure of life. Therefore, animal agencies at home and abroad are very cautious when it comes to issues involving release into the wild. There are few places to go out into the wild, but it is difficult to go out into the wild. There is another reason that is very difficult to talk about. If kept in a zoo, it is an asset of the zoo and can bring economic income. If it is released, it will become a wild animal. Protect animals and protect the environment. Everyone talks about this and it's okay, but if you really ask the zoo to release the animals that have spent a lot of effort and money to raise, it's not like cutting off the flesh, it hurts. And Suming's goal is not as simple as releasing 1, 2, or 10 animals into the wild, but to release everything he can. If someone else said this, he would definitely be scolded by the whole zoo. The Yangchuan City Zoo has managed to accumulate this little fortune over the past few decades, and now he has to give up more than a third of it with just one sentence. It's not like he doesn't feel bad for selling his father's land, he's a typical prodigal son. In fact, after learning the news, many people in the industry had already said this about Suming behind his back. Fortunately, although the Yangchuan City Zoo does not yet belong to Suming in terms of property rights, its management is a typical one-word order. Suming gave one sentence. Although Sister Tong did not understand, she still seriously counted the numbers that might be released into the wild. The animals went. The statistical tasks were assigned, and the clerks in charge were all shocked and confused when they received the task. They even wondered whether Sister Tong had misunderstood what Director Su meant. Sister, even if the entire park is now focused on releasing them into the wild, it will take at least 5 or 6 years to release all the animals into the wild. We don't have enough manpower. I learned in school that releasing animals into the wild requires the participation of experts. It requires a lot of processes such as demonstration, release plan design, rehearsal, and training. I have never heard of anyone releasing them into the wild rashly. This young man, in fact, the clerk didn't dare to say anything. Suming's behavior of slapping his head and letting go when he asked was regarded as a negative example in the textbooks. A clerk quietly speculated, is our director a drunkard who doesn't care about drinking? What new plans have he made? As we all know, Director Su has a good mind, so maybe something that seems nonsensical at first will pop up. Ideas, in the end, can achieve unexpected success. You are just making a wild guess. Another clerk shook his head. The director's previous methods were all for the welfare of the zoo. This release, Even if it is a success, all the animals that the zoo has raised for so many years will return to nature. Our zoo has suffered a huge loss. The most we can receive is praise from our superiors. As you said, isn't it a benefit to be praised by a superior unit? After all, our garden is a public service, and a good reputation will naturally bring benefits in various aspects, the person before said, unconvinced. Then it depends on how much honor it is. Our principal is already a representative of the National People's Congress, so why do we still care about this small honor? It's not worth the loss at all. The office is a classic place for gossiping, especially in a relatively leisurely unit like the zoo. Gossip about the boss of the office and the boy in the West has almost become a kind of office culture. There is no scruple in talking about it. Su-ming has always had a good temper and smiled. So much so that these young clerks are quite courageous, and even the leaders often discuss them behind their backs. A little girl who had just graduated said, "Sister Tong, letting it go wild is definitely not good for the zoo." "Do you think the director of the zoo has other ideas?" the little girl said while making a you-know expression and a wink. The implication is that Su-ming might want to secretly benefit himself by letting go. Speaking of which, this little girl really guessed the general direction, but no one really thought of it. Could it be that the director of the park wants to secretly sell the animals, in the name of releasing them into the wild, and release the front legs and then have the back legs taken away? Someone asked in surprise. That's okay. This is called normal metabolism. There are more and more animals in our zoo. It's a good thing to eliminate a group of ordinary animals and replace them with rarer and more precious ones, someone said. Okay, the more you talk, the more outrageous it becomes. None of you have any control over your words. Seeing that Principal Su has a good temper, you dare to ruin the leader like this behind his back. Sister Tong couldn't stand it anymore and glared, "I can't let me tell you, where did you say these things? No one should talk nonsense outside the door of this office." "Sister, don't worry, we still don't understand this." "That's right. If you ask me, the director should just make some money." "Sister, look at it, at least half of the people in our zoo have a monthly income of more than 10,000 yuan. Even those of us who sit in the office and blow the air conditioner can get 70 to 80 yuan a year. 10,000, the bonus has skyrocketed, and the director himself is still getting a dead salary." Someone even accused Su-ming of being wronged. Sister Tong is also a gossip at heart, and hummed, "The director has his own business, and makes much more than the zoo in a year. You guys are just too short-sighted, and the director can be interested in a few small bucks from reselling animals." The clerks were still chatting and wanted to continue chatting. Sister Tong waved her hand, okay, go ahead and do what you have to do. No matter how free you are in the office, you can't chat from morning to night. Hurry up and let Neng go wild count the number of animals." The statistical work was carried out for 3 full days, and finally a rough result was obtained. According to Su-ming's plan, animals that can be released into the wild must meet 2 major conditions. First, they can still find a living population in the wild. Animals like the Yangtze River dolphin, which have no wild population at all, will die of loneliness if they are released into the wild. This species will completely die out, so artificial protection must be carried out and considered after reproduction. Second, they must be relatively docile or do not pose a major threat to humans. After statistics, there are nearly 1,000 animals that can meet these 2 conditions, involving more than 40 species and orders. Among them, birds are the main ones, accounting for about half. The rest are common animals in the zoo, including various rabbits, several types of deer, foxes of all sizes, grass mud horses, including macaques in the Monkey Mountain and their neighbors, gibbons. There are also some animals that have the experience of going out with Su-ming to hang out, and they have also been specially approved to be included in the list of release into the wild. The Saker falcon is among them. "Ni ma, I want to go out too." "Ni ma, Ma, let me go. The two macaws are not happy. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 510. These two parrots spoke English better than Su Ming. When they saw Su Ming, they spoke both Chinese and English and complained for a while. If they had seen the black and white hostages in Iraq, they would probably have directly said I will be back instead of Su Ming's uncultured I will be back. In terms of their ability to survive in the wild, macaws are actually no weaker than sea turtles. Creatures with high language talents have high intelligence. With their strength and flying ability, few animals can do anything to them, and they have a very effective survival philosophy: run away if you can't fight, and never provoke dangerous creatures. The problem is that the enemies of animals are not only animals, but also humans. The two sisters have gorgeous feathers and jump like big penguins. They are so eye-catching. If they were released in the wild, they might be captured within a few days. Su Ming thought about it and released them both. However, there are 3 rules: you are not allowed to leave the zoo area, you are not allowed to bite children, and adults are not allowed to do so, and most importantly, you are not allowed to scold tourists. Fly. Fly. Bye-bye. The two parrots didn't really fly either. With their big bodies, flying on their wings was actually a very hard job. After being released from the cage, he and the 2 little monsters from the video game jumped away and chatted and complained as they ran, just like crosstalk. Don't run away, Su Ming warned from behind. He really had this idea. When the time is right, let the 2 parrots do crosstalk together. However, they both work hard and are unwilling to suffer losses. It is a question of who will be praised when the time comes. Looking at the 2 parrots going away, a group of old experts over 50 years old around Su Ming looked at each other. This large-scale release work has alarmed relevant units in half of China. The Provincial Academy of Agricultural Sciences, as well as several universities in surrounding provinces and cities, have sent expert teams and set up an expert group to come to the zoo on the spot. Inspection. In other words, supervision. Although the zoo has been restructured, it must be reported to the public if it plans to release animals into the wild on a large scale. The government is a layman on this matter and is very cautious in this matter. Under normal circumstances, this large-scale action will definitely be rejected outright. Still, for Su Ming's sake, Yangchuan City and the province did not stop him, but they also required strict control and scientific demonstration. Xiao Su, you have to think about this carefully. There seems to be no need to rush into the wild on a large scale now. This expert is an old acquaintance, Liang Shi's mentor, Professor Chu. After coming to the zoo, this was the first thing Lao Chu said. He and Su Ming were old acquaintances. He cared about animals as well as people, and he didn't want Su Ming to take risks without being prepared. Old professor, time waits for no one, Su Ming laughed. Times have changed. The older generation has a relatively slow pace of life. They can spend decades or even a lifetime doing something. But now is a fast-paced era. 10,000 years is too long. They only seize the day and do what they want to do. As long as you think things through clearly, you can take action immediately. Confucius's disciples asked him whether we should think twice before doing something and consider it 3 times before doing it. Confucius smiled, no need to go to so much trouble, just make a decision, argue it again, consider it twice and then you can make it. If a person wants to do too many things, a short life is not enough, so he will cry to God for another 500 years, and it is impossible to procrastinate on something without limit. Su Ming has been working hard, not just for money and power, but more. Since God has given him a superpower, he wants to try to see how far he can go in his lifetime. Some people want to live their lives in an ordinary way, but Su Ming likes a life full of unknowns and challenges. Director Su, I think some animals in your zoo can be released into the wild immediately. Take these two parrots for example. Another old professor looked at the retreating figures of the macaws and marveled, they can talk. There are a lot of parrots, but I've never seen one that's so smart. It's not a big problem for them to be released into the wild. But they can't all be such smart animals in your zoo, right? Of course not. Su Ming secretly laughed in his heart. If I wanted to, all the animals in the park could come to you and dance a horse riding dance. Other zoos across the country have also carried out some release work before. Director Su, you can communicate with these zoos and learn some lessons. The expert said it politely, but the meaning of his words could not be clearer. Compared with the release work of several other zoos, the release of Yangchuan City Zoo is obviously too reckless. After the expert team came to the zoo, they held a meeting at the zoo immediately. Together with Su Ming, they contacted several other zoos in his National Zoo Management Q group to learn from their experience. Yunnan Zoo once carried out heron release work. Those dozen herons were rescued from poachers. When they arrived at the Yunnan Zoo, they were covered with bruises, and some even had their legs broken. Their hunting ability has become very weak. Therefore, Yunnan Zoo specially formulated a 6-month wild survival ability recovery plan to train their hunting ability and ability to avoid danger. In the first 2 or 3 days, the herons were completely indifferent to the small fish and loaches swimming in the water. They were used to being fed by keepers on a regular basis. After 2 weeks of gradually reducing the amount of food, the herons were so hungry that they could not stand it anymore and finally recovered their hunting instinct. However, it was not smooth at the beginning. The herons, who are good at fishing in nature, could not even use their long beaks. They often had to dive into the water 5 or 6 times before they could catch a fish. After catching the fish, the herons next to them did not learn to hunt on their own. They ignored the abundant food in the water and fought for the small fish. It took a hard training of half a year to make these herons adapt to hunting and survival in the natural environment. Hunting training is only one part of survival training. The panda released into the wild by the National Animal Research Center was even more exaggerated. It was born in 2007 and began to be released into the wild in 2010. It took 3 years, 2 stages, and more than a dozen special trainings, such as being able to eat wild food by itself, finding water sources independently, finding shelters in the wild, identifying natural enemies, companion animals, and individuals of the same species, and being able to effectively avoid natural enemies or other dangerous animals. Then an expert discussion meeting was held, and experts from all over the country agreed that it was possible to try releasing them into the wild. Even so, we cannot be completely assured. After releasing them into the wild, they were equipped with a small tracker and were monitored at all times. This shows how difficult it is to release them into the wild.